Hello, everybody. Welcome to Adapt AI Group again. We have another exciting guest here today to continue our series as we talk to business owners and founders, throughout the industry, really heavily with supply chain and logistics here. So Allison Ullrich is here. She is a founder of Potentiate OS. We're really excited to have you here. Before we jump in, I'd love if you could just kind of tell us about yourself a little bit and your company.
Really happy to be here and share some information. I have been in supply chain operations for close to 20 years, but I was really fortunate early on in my career to be in advertising and marketing and product development, and then evolving, through those roles through Fortune 500 up through startups, and now to where I'm at with founding my own, agency for consulting, founding brands, and then also helping individuals define and change the navigation or course of their career if they're stuck in the bottleneck in the world of supply chain and ops. So my approach is very contrarian. I believe like the best operations run without like constraint oversight. And like I mentioned, being able to have the opportunity to scale companies like Outer and Hydro, as well as like Wayfair, while also, going back for my MBA later on in life and doing Ironman events. I decided to go out on my own because what gives me enjoyment and passion is helping others succeed, seeing that look on their face, whether it's for their brand, for their team, or for themselves as an individual. So it's about helping them build better systems that create freedom. And again, that's again about like if it's about a founder scaling beyond daily operations or helping professionals figure out how to monetize themselves and their expertise better.
Awesome. I love that. Obviously something you're very passionate about, which that's half of the battle, right? Is finding something that you enjoy doing, and
Completely.
then doing it well. As you kind of went out on your own and you founded your own company, what were some of those, initial challenges that you learned some of those hard lessons? Do you have any of those best practices that you would share with other founders in a similar situation?
I think that's really tied really closely to my career journey to get me to a point where I felt prepared enough. You're never going to be fully prepared for any decision that you make. It is always about, taking in additional data points so you can, arrive at a rational, logical decision based off of what you have, and then you do have to lean in. But I look at it as like if I were to like use the analogy of like an Ironman race. For me, the swim was like really the foundational building for me when I was at Airgas. That leadership journey, started at the deep end. I learned that real leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's not about the title. It's about the opportunity to make a difference and make an impact. And when you remove that level of ego to lead with empathy, it really helps multiply your results, not only just from a numerical perspective, but from that personal perspective that people really are hungry for. And they always have been. People want to be led. They want a little bit of direction. They also want to be trusted. So as I move from an account executive, a plant manager, running a very large territory, then as a sales director, it's about sustainable leadership. It's very similar to, when you approach endurance athletics. I wanted to be able to exceed gain share targets for sure, because it's about building a really strong system that, is founded on longevity and patience. And then for me, it's like then it's the next part of the race, the bike, which is scaling innovation. From a corporate leadership perspective, like this was really the middle phase where I needed to really find myself. Instead of feeling like I needed to, go along with the beat of the drum everybody was doing, I kept feeling this consistent contrarian voice in the back of my head of like, yes, that's the right way to do it, but speak your mind, do something different. But it's really about understanding how to do things differently. So instead of adding complexity, I wanted to add simplicity. One thing I've heard early on in my career was like, we always do things a certain way. This is the X way to do it. And I would think, sure, if I'm learning about an organization that I'm working at, that is fine to a certain point. But culturally, that then upends what I think to be the holistic positivity of working at a company. That's against what you signed up for from a culture perspective. And when you find yourself in that position of leadership and you have somewhat of a voice, you do have to stand for that, because then you're allowing people to see it's about less complexity and what people want to believe in. Because when you if you were to consistently challenge the assumption, that means that that growth requires some level of complexity. And instead of always forcing yourself to work in complexity, you have to learn when to switch in and out of it, which helps you save energy. It helps you grow. I feel like that's more of like the run portion. It's that entrepreneurial leadership. It's this final phase where, when everything converges, and I realized I've enjoyed working in organizations and for people, making things grow and building teams, but that's not doing it for me anymore. It's that final part of a race where it's the marathon portion of an Ironman where all of your training really it meets reality. So while I started formulating the idea of Potentiate in my mind while I was finishing my MBA, I realized all these pieces were coming together at a certain point to push me across the leading edge for what true leadership is and what that means for me versus what it means for somebody else. And for me, that's about creating freedom for myself and for others, helping them, scale beyond daily operations, enabling people to realize you are better than this current title that you're in, and you don't have to be stuck in it. You have to try something different, because it's about people as we see the changing landscape of the job market and organizations, whether it's the economy, politics, or technology. People today need to be their own leader, build their own brand, because building systems that allows them to liberate their potential.
I love all of that. Yeah, I really resonate with the leadership topic. We talk to a lot of leaders here throughout the industry, and it's always interesting to hear how each leader approaches this. In terms of effective leadership, right? Actually driving those results and driving productivity, driving revenue and scaling. How would you define what effective leadership is in
Sure.
business?
It is not, effective leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about asking better questions. A lot of traditional leaders will focus on like, how do we do this faster? Should we be doing this at all? And I think for me, a defining moment is, when you find yourself like in a really challenging, consistent situation. Like one for me is that always occurred when I was working for startup brands is it's the peak season. And this is not a new thing. This is a constant cycle that happens every year. The sailings that are going out the door July and August, landing in September and October, all the way through January. And, if you look at it from the perspective, again, of like training, it's about when is the right time to change versus like when it seems impossible. And you have to understand who the players are and who the options are. Because if you want to do a transition during, before a very busy period of business, you have to make certain that people understand your sense of urgency. It's also about saving time and how that actually ends up saving everybody across your organization. And it helps save the customers as well, too. You have to figure out that scalable system. And instead of constantly saying, well, it's peak, I'm just going to work 18 hours and it's going to be crazy. And, we've never done this before. It's the fact of, it is going to be challenging, but this is what I signed up for. It's not about command and control. Now it's about creating those autonomous systems. So ultimately, when I learned to approach it that way in my career, my goal actually isn't to be irreplaceable.
That's a whole topic in itself of how to lead through change, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. But
Yeah,
it requires an effective leader to go through that.
correct.
So how would you balance strategic decision making and empathy and emotional intelligence in leading teams through, especially through peak season as we enter Q4 here soon?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you need to really find what a threshold effort is and, what your recovery pace is going to be. That's why leadership is really similar to when I think about, again, I'm going back to a lot of stuff about Ironman, but the way in which I decided to approach going into Ironman was, oh, I know how to lift, I know how to run, I know how to swim. And I know how to do all these things, but when you stitch them all together for one continuous actual event, your body and your mind has an even greater opportunity to break down before adaptability. And when you learn and calculate the capability and efforts of yourself, or in this instance, like the efforts of your team, and like what their thresholds are and what they need for like empathy and recovery, leadership is really similar because strategic decisions, they require that analytical clarity. Going faster an extra 3 miles an hour on the bike. Can I push myself an extra 20 seconds faster on the next mile? Because otherwise my body's going to break down, or I'm not going to be satisfied when I finally cross the finish line. And to like refer that back into business, for myself, like when I was running, a manufacturing plant at Airgas, I had to make a huge decision to reduce a 6-day work week, 24-hour schedule to 5 days with no job losses. And putting that together is a strategic decision that is data driven about efficiency and cost modeling and like productivity metrics. You find a way to approach that when you are making a decision, including everybody or needs to be an executive leadership team. It helps bring it back to the sense of reality of it. The numbers are important. Hearing what people believe in and where they stand, they've had skin in the game up until now. And how can we take their thoughts into consideration, not to give them exactly the solution that they want, but it helps us balance out the answers.
Yeah, it could definitely be tough too because you have the pressure of the business, right, down your neck,
Yeah.
but you also need to make sure that you value your people, or you're not going to end up having the right people on your team because they're going to leave. So it's definitely a balancing act,
Yeah.
and it takes practice and coaching and being willing to reflect and really challenge yourself. So as we kind of wrap up, I wanted to ask, in your view, looking 3, 5, maybe a little bit more out, years out, what's that next frontier of leadership look like? What's that next generational shift that you kind of see on the horizon for us?
I think, I'm fortunate to hear the founder business brand side versus the individual side, in really the harmony that people are looking for on both ends of the spectrum. People constantly are talking about AI replacing jobs. I see AI as an ultimate opportunity for leaders to understand the way in which it needs to work for them, and they need to lean into it in the right manner, with clarity systems and governance set up. A lot of people fear disruption, and I really see liberation surrounding AI because you want to be able to, and I spoke about this on a podcast back, I think in April or May, but, we want our individuals to feel empowered to make decisions. But at the same time, you're liberating your team or yourself to then work and function at a higher level. You need to look at it as the opportunity for productivity over AI being laziness. Freeing the leader to focus on what machines can't do. Because what we need to focus on is building culture, making judgment calls, and creating systems that adapt. I think remote work wise, leaders really want to try to like recreate office culture virtually. But instead, remote work demands leadership. You've got to have that asynchronous decision making, outcome based management, trust first as a culture. And I think overall, like younger professionals, there is this new sense and like slice or lens of what it means to work that continually gets deeper with the definition. Is younger professionals, they don't really seem like they want to climb the corporate ladder. They want to build their own. And I think we need to applaud that. But they also need to realize the deep practices of what defines business and entrepreneurship is really founded on a lot of the historical opportunities and like business cases and white papers that are important for people to learn from in order to build on their own. And I think smart leaders, they monetize their expertise early, whether that's being able to leverage into newer, stronger positions so they keep moving up, or they're able to build something on the side.
That's really good advice, and I think that it's going to be interesting, right? Just to see how things continue to evolve. Really interesting.
I want to help them build the systems that work without them. We want to help build autonomous supply chains and self-managing teams. But the ultimate tool is that leadership skill, because that is what gives people in your organization or yourself sustainable freedom. And that's really what it means a lot to me that they want to work with me and, hear my thoughts out. So that would be where I would leave it.